Thank you very much. Good afternoon. To ETAS. It's a conference I love coming to, and to all the people responsible for organising today and tomorrow, huge congratulations and thanks from, I think, all of us. Because it's anyone who's ever had anything to do with the organisation of a conference knows what it's like, and it's a lot of work, and well, yeah, we're just very lucky that you do this. And my second thank you, of course, has to be to Helping Languages, two of them are sitting there and here, and my publishers. I'm thrilled to work with them, and it's a great pleasure to be here, as it were, on their behalf. I don't know whether the title of my talk resonates with any of you at all, but in case it doesn't, let me explain where it comes from. Anyone recognise that? Well, it's from the King James Bible. And it's part of St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians. And as I'm sure all of you very church-going religious people will know, this is St. Paul talking about meeting God, about what it's like when you meet God. Now, I have some problem. I don't expect to meet God at any time soon, or indeed ever, because that's not my thing. But it's a fascinating thing, because the idea is you see the future kind of through a glass darkly, but in the end, when the future arrives, then you get to see it face to face. Now, of course, this quote isn't about the future; it's about understanding God, understanding, and just as I also am known. Because I'll get to finally be known by him and get him to know me, and wow, then we'll be face to face, then I'll really get it. Well, whether you're religious or not, doesn't matter. That's the point. We see the future through a glass darkly, and sooner or later we'll get to find out what's going on. So here we are in 2017, and boy, the future looks interesting, doesn't it? Ish. What does the future look like, you know? And what's going to happen, and what the hell's going on, please? That's what this talk is all about. And to give you an idea of what the future suddenly looks like when you're not expecting it, anyone know where that is? Well, as it happens, it's in São Paulo, in Brazil, one of the biggest cities in the world. What does the photo show you? Yes, no, it doesn't just show you traffic.
White cars.
White cars, which means they are? They are taxis. Why are they there? Because they're protesting. They're really, really mad. A bit like these guys in Madrid. No, no! And that doesn't mean no, we don't want to be part of the European Union. It means no, no. And here's some more taxi drivers for you. And what are they protesting about? Uber. Uber. It came from nowhere. And suddenly, this thing you did all your life in London, you have to learn what's called the knowledge. And the knowledge means that you have to be able, if someone gets into your cab, hails you in the street and says, take me to Hewitt Road, in Haringey, you have to be able to drive there just like that. At least that's what it used to be like. But now, anyone can do it, because all they need is a sat-nav. And now, this thing that you spent your years doing has suddenly, at the stroke of a... I don't know my metaphor. At the turn of a page, the opening of the door, it's gone. At the swish of it's gone. Your whole livelihood has gone. or at least it might very well go. Boy, that's called disruption. Your whole life has been disrupted. What about that? What's that all about? Airbnb. Imagine if you were in the boutique hotel business. Small little hotel, lovely. There you are, and you're all part of the small hotel movement. And then these guys come along and at the swish of a finger, you're buggered. You just swipe the screen with you. Or you're a little travel agent arranging little hotels for people. I don't need you anymore. Go away. Because this disruptive thing has turned up and it threatens your very livelihood, your way of life, everything you think you know and you do. Boom. Scary. Do you know about purple? No, neither did I. Purple makes mattresses, in case the picture isn't clear. Purple came along, and it all started when some guys were trying to make cushions for wheelchairs. So if you think about it, people who live in wheelchairs have to spend the whole bloody day sitting down. So the cushion you're sitting on really matters, and they came up apparently with some incredibly good design for cushions for wheelchair users, which were much more comfortable and throughout the day than others. And then they started using that technology for these things, mattresses. But that wasn't what made them disruptive. What made them disruptive is they stripped away all the stuff and the faff and the messing around. They took it right out of the store and they said, right, mail order, the whole damn thing, except it's not mail order anymore. It's boom, talk about clicking the screen, boom, click the screen, we'll send you one of our mattresses. At about a third of the price of any mattress you'll ever buy in the department store. And not only that, but we say you can keep the mattress for 1,000 days, and if you don't like it, we'll take it back. Now, if you were a mattress retailer, that is really, really scary. And it's happening all the time, isn't it? It's happening all the time. People come along, and just when you think your life is sorted and you know what you're doing, and someone comes along and says, sorry, bye, you're redundant, we don't need you anymore. You're gone. Scary stuff. It's called disruption. Disruption. In the world of business, they call it disruption. When a business is disrupted. And sometimes it's terminal. Someone comes along, you're gone. What is disruption? Well, one of the books that they most often use in places like the Harvard Business School is Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma. When new technologies cause great firms to fail. And he suggests there are two kinds of disruption. By the way, I do know this is an English teachers' conference. I promise you we will talk about English language teaching sooner or later, but just bear with me for a bit, okay? Bear with me. Okay. He says there are two types of disruption we should be worried about. The first is new market disruption. And that can be scary. That's when someone invents something and creates a new market and suddenly everyone wants the new something, they don't want the old something anymore. And yet that can happen. But the one which is far more powerful and undermining is what he calls low-end disruption. And that's when someone comes up with a way of doing something which is better, more efficient, more interesting, more usable, more blah, blah, blah than anyone else. So, for example, imagine you want a taxi. You want a taxi. You know, I spent all my time in Mexico. It's mi país favorito. I love Mexico. It's a great city. You know, people say, watch out for the taxi drivers. And you know, last time I was in Mexico, I got ripped off by a taxi driver. They do a very clever trick with 500 peso pieces. I'll tell you about it some other time. But that was the only time I took a taxi on the street. Because actually it's really convenient. Just get your phone out, click, they've got Uber there everywhere. And it wasn't that they'd invented something new. They're still taxis. It was low-end disruption. They'd just come up with a better way of doing it, a more usable way of doing it. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, of course, innovation isn't necessarily disruptive. Coming up with a new idea doesn't necessarily disrupt anything. So, for example, here is a new idea. This was the 1906 American Napier touring car. Cars were around for 30 years, this kind of car. They were around for 30 years and they didn't disrupt anything. Everyone said, my God, what a wonderful thing. But for 30 years, people still travelled with horses all the time, and in Cuba they still do, but that's another story. But for 30 years, you know, no one said, oh my word, it's the end of the horse-drawn trade. Of course, you knew what killed it. It wasn't the car that killed it. That wasn't what killed it. This is what killed it. That's what killed it. It wasn't the innovation. It was the means and the way of doing it that really killed it off. And it depends. I'm not a businessman and I haven't done an MBA at the Harvard Business School, so I may be way out of line here. But the suggestion is that business models, not products, are disruptive. The way you provide something, the way you deliver something, the way something is brought to you is the thing that disrupts the way it used to be brought to you. And this is happening in our daily lives, and it happens in teaching. And it happens in teaching, by the way, whether we're in the private sector, the public sector, or, as with many of us, somewhere in between some of the time. This all came to my attention, and I got excited by this in November 2015, when I went to possibly the best plenary talk I've ever been to. It was given by this man, John Thurber, in Brisbane, in Australia, English Australia. And he gave a talk about disruption. This won't tell me on it. And you can see almost from that photo, he's a tremendously charismatic young man. He's got fantastic charm and huge he gets really excited, and you know, people just eat, you know that expression, they eat out of his hand. Because you'd say in Spanish, es que tiene el don. He's got the magic, the gift, you know, that kind of thing. Magic. I'm going to quote him 2 or 3 times in this talk. But in the course of talking about disruption, he said something which sounds really, really kind of, but it isn't. And this is what he said. Here's what he said about disruption. Change is really slow until it isn't. And what does he cite there? Well, the story of the digital camera. The digital camera that was around for a long time, and nobody in Kodak knew what was coming. And they kept on producing this camera and that camera and this camera. And suddenly, within about a flash of a second, change is very, very slow, and then suddenly, boom! And that was the end of Kodak. Change is very slow until it isn't. Things bubble away, and then suddenly when they're not looking, boom! Uber, the kind of Uber idea, that was bubbling away. You know, sat-navs, everything bubbling away. Oh, we'll be all right, it's never going to happen. Boom! Or imagine a 15 or 20-year campaign run by a bunch of right-wing crazies and sort of gently bubbling away in all the kind of right-wing press and the media. 15, 20 years of this, they're all a bunch of nutters, crazy, it's never going to happen June the 23rd. And suddenly Brexit. Nobody thought it was going to happen. It just bubbled away, all these people talking this rubbish. I don't have an opinion, obviously. Or how about a bunch of loonies who took their name from what happened in Boston Harbor during the American War of Independence, you know? Bubbling away, this bubbling away of kind of all the people on the fringes all over the Midwest and all that kind of bubbling away all the time. Change is really slow, nothing much change, nothing much really change. It's day 1 of Armageddon. It suddenly happened. Change is very slow until it isn't. That's what disruption is like. And the future? So what does your future look like? I mean, in a general sense, what does our future look like? Well, I'm going to be a bit risky here and try and do some prediction, or at least worry about the future. Predicting the future is really, really stupid. We've all got stories of people who said, oh, we'll never need more than 10 computers in the world, you know, that kind of stuff. So be careful about the future. But I read a magazine called Wired, because I kind of like to think that I'm a bit techie, a bit involved with technology, and I like to read that. And so this was an article that interested me. This is just to kind of get you going. It's about artificial intelligence. And I don't really understand this stuff, but to give you a sort of idea of what's going on, they say that this article said that in the old days, people used to spend all their time being computer programmers. And so you had to write code for everything. So, for example, if you wanted a computer to recognize what a cat was, you wrote lines and lines and lines of code explaining plus cat, minus cat, plus dog, minus dog, all this sort of thing. Then you would know then your computer would know what a cat was. But what's happened with artificial intelligence now is that you don't have to write code. You just show your computer lots and lots of cats. You show it lots and lots of cats, and the computer will learn what it is. That's the scary idea of artificial intelligence. You just show the device lots of stuff, and the device can learn. You don't have to teach it everything. You don't have to write a little bit of code for everything it does. It can learn on its own. Well, what about this one? When robots do everything, what do we do? And robots do a lot already. We're having at the moment huge arguments in Britain about how many people you need to run a train. And the poor commuters who live in the south of England have had the most miserable few months because there's a battle royal going on between the train companies and the unions. The train companies say we don't need a guard, we only need a driver. The unions say, no, you need a guard as well. And they're protecting their workers' jobs and things like that. You know what? They're all something, you can fill it in the wind. Pretty soon you won't need drivers at all. Why, robots are perfectly capable of doing trains. And when the robots do all the work, maybe robots are perfectly capable of teaching English. Ooh, we'll come to that in a minute. But the reason I'm showing you this is because the quote just made me laugh. Look at this. And they're just being funny, but they've sort of got a point. Here's something you may have read about. What about this? There's the machine. And apparently, the company is called Momentum, and you never quite know whether it's going to happen, but they're going to open a burger joint in San Francisco where you don't need anyone to flip burgers anymore. Because a robot's perfectly capable of making good burgers. And you know what? Probably better than people who are paid less than the minimum wage and are in a really bad mood. And if you think this is all a bit fanciful and nothing to do with teaching, we do need to get a little bit near teaching. This plenary is only an hour, so I've got to do something which has relevance to us. Then, come along to the world of testing. Come along to the world of testing. Who grades tests? We do. No, you don't. We don't need you anymore. The TOEFL test, the Pearson test of academic English, for example, the free speaking and the free writing are graded by the machine. They say, and I have no way to prove or disprove this because I haven't read the literature and I'm not that good, they say that they have done so much architectural work on designing the software which grades the student tests that, you know what? It's much better at it than you are. Why? Well, it doesn't fall asleep. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't have a bad mood. It doesn't have one glass of wine too many in the evenings. It marks every student exactly the same. Reliability, perfect reliability. And it's faster. And what else is it? A lot cheaper. So something that many people in this room used to have as a kind of sideline to their main teaching activity, grading tests. People all over the world, professional test graders, bye-bye. That's in our world. Disruption. Disruption is really scary. Because I mean, as you can see, I've been in the English language teaching world for many, many years, and I kind of assumed it was always going to be a bit like it always was. And in a way, so do all of you, even some of you who are significantly younger than me, sort of think it's going to be as it is. Maybe it isn't. So let's have a talk about English language teaching. Now, let's talk about English language teaching. Well, what's the future for us? I think we're threatened, or challenged, if you like, in three particular areas. The first one is the threat from outside the profession. And the threat from outside the profession I've already alluded to. The fact that tests can be marked by machines, not humans. And of course that's not from outside the profession. There are people within the profession. But they brought in the algorithm kings. They brought in the guys who know about this kind of stuff. They brought in the designers. In the States, Pearson, in the States, has teacher tests. And the teachers have to submit a video. And the videos are graded by people who have no teaching experience at all. They're just filling in a check sheet. And pretty soon you won't need the people. A machine can read it. What about this? Do you know what the Waverley pilot system is? It's translation software. Now, we've all spent lots of our lives laughing at Google Translate. Type something in German and see what comes out in English. Ha-ha! Or Spanish, or Portuguese, or whatever the language is. Ha-ha! But it's getting better, and better, and better. And this system apparently involves you wearing a headphone and me wearing a headphone, and you can talk to me in any language you bloody want, and provided I've got my system working, I'll hear it in English. And suppose that you didn't speak English, you speak, I don't know, Croatian or something like that, I can talk to you in English and you'll hear it in Croat. Wow. Translation software is on the point of being absolutely fantastic. What are we going to do about that? What happens to us then? Because one of the reasons we do so well, especially I suspect, though I have no evidence for this in a country like Switzerland, is because the need for business people, especially business people, people involved in the hotel trade or any other kind of trade, to speak in English so that they can get along and around and have mobility and so on and so forth. But if you don't need that anymore, do they still need to study English? By the way, well, we'll come to that in a minute. Or not all threats, by the way, need to scare us very much. Duolingo, remember Duolingo? Whatever it's called. This adaptive software business. I got my student, I did 2 weeks teaching at the Norwich Institute of Language Education last summer, and I got my students, we all signed up for some language learning software, and I said to them, we all had to choose a language and spend 2 weeks learning the language, and this would be part of our sort of evolution of these 2 weeks of talking about teaching. The person who lasted the longest lasted 4 days, and the rest of them just couldn't be bothered. This was going to ruin our lives. You went to talks where people said, this is going to ruin your life. Just learning online, learning digitally. You know what? It hasn't. This extraordinary man, Philip Kerr, who you may know, writes an incredible blog about adaptive learning. Adaptive learning? Because the claim of people like Duolingo was that a computer language learning software is better at its job than you are. Why? Because the computer in nanoseconds can adapt to you. I don't mean to you, I mean to you, and to you, and to you. And for each one of you, it will adapt to you personally, instead of adapting to the whole group. And teachers are very bad at that. No, I'll rephrase that. Teachers find that a real challenge, because if you've got 30 people in the room, it's very difficult to react 30 individually ways. So the claim here was that the computer can track every single thing you do, how long it takes you to do this, how many times you've tried to do that. It could even track the pressure on the mouse, or the number of times you use the mouse, or the pressure on the keypad. It could do all those things and adapt to you. And you know what? The claim is it's better than you, because one of the things we discussed, Sarah Russell's talk this morning, and also in Robert's talk this afternoon, what are teachers good for? Well, one of the things that teachers do is they give feedback. That's what makes us, giving feedback is one of the most crucial things we ever do. If you look at Hattie's research, it's number 2 of the things that really matter, the way teachers feedback to students. But actually we're not that good at it. Trying to decide what to correct, when to correct, how to correct, who to correct, for example. Not that easy, is it? But a machine, that's the claim, can do it better. So companies like Newton and the Duolingo people have invested billions of dollars into this. And so far, it's had almost no effect at all. We'll see, but so far no effect at all. What about the disruption of, I can't go on. The disruption of MOOCs, you know about MOOCs? These massively online, free in university courses that were going to screw up every university in the world. So far, who knows? So far, they haven't done it. So far, what seems to have happened with the MOOCs, the massive open online courses, free, is that very many people just don't complete the course. They don't stay the course. But there's this kind of thing as well. Does anyone recognise this? Okay, here goes, let's see. That's augmented reality. Augmented reality, you've got all these sort of course books around, not course material around, where you just sort of place something on a book and suddenly the animal rises out of the book and you want to know what it eats, it'll suddenly have something where it eats and stuff like that. Augmented reality allows you to have real reality in your classroom. It's not just crappy old sort of holograms, but really good holograms like that whale. You know, absolutely fantastic. Is that? Does the threat from outside trouble us? I don't know, but there's a lot of disruption on the horizon, guys. There's a lot of disruption on the horizon. And this is the kind of disruption we're talking about. And moving on from that, I think the whole concept of the classroom may be ready for a bit of disruption. Who knows? And yes, I know, of course, by the way, that the difference between a classroom in the backwoods of Paraguay, since we were talking about Paraguay earlier, I can't remember where it's, there you are. We were talking about, the classroom in the backwoods of Paraguay is a little bit different from a classroom in high-end Zurich. I know that. But what about the classroom as a place where learning takes place? And what about me as someone who uses the same phrasal verb twice in the same sentence? That's practical. Okay, so you were kind enough to mention the practice of English language teaching. Well, here's a diagram from the latest edition. You'll recognise these diagrams. In the chapter on classrooms and seating, we have, there's the teacher, and there's the board, and then we have, you could arrange your class like this, you could arrange your class like that, you could arrange your class like that. I got this from our dentist. You've seen these diagrams before, haven't you? Different ways of seating your class. That's the different ways to arrange the class. Is it? Maybe we're going to think of completely reconfiguring whatever place it is where people are to learn. Maybe they shouldn't be sitting down at all ever. Maybe the whole thing is going to be some wall touchpads on the wall. I don't know. And if it's not just that,
Then, what about classroom technology itself? Well, every 3 years something comes which is going to disrupt our lives forever. What has disrupted the classroom, your classroom life, in your teaching lifetime so far?
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Most classrooms still have a board in them, because it's the most useful piece of teaching software. But of course, some of them are interactive whiteboards. But there's a huge move to suggest that BYOD is the future. BYOD stands for? Bring your own. It's always useful checking these things. You never like it. Stands for bring your own device. Because the idea is that any student you want can just look up anything or get anything they want on their phone without any trouble. But is that the technology we need? There are some theorists, and we'll mention one of them a bit later, who actually think that your own device is absolute, it just doesn't help learning at all. It has to be one device around which people are grouped, for example. But what is the ideal technology for a classroom? Is there anything about to disrupt us? Now, what I'm trying to suggest so far, after I did all the doom and gloom stuff, is that unless we have real thinking about not necessarily what's coming, but how we could think forward, what ideas we could come up for with better things. Unless we are thinking in that way, thinking future, especially in 2017, then we are open to disruption. We're open to being shocked. We're open to being, oh my God. Whereas if, on the contrary, we're asking ourselves these questions, like, what is the best way people should learn? What ways do you think other people are thinking of how people should learn? Physically, or maybe not physically at all. What are the best kind of technologies? Unless we are really arguing in our own minds and with each other about these things, then we're kind of like sitting ducks for whatever else is coming, it seems to me. Will students come to class at all? Well, I have. We've worked together. I'm proud to have been your teacher, but I only met her face to face for the first time today because she was a student on the MAT Soul at the New School in New York, where I teach. That's online, and so you didn't come to class. Well, you did. But, do students need to come to class anymore? Well, I think so. I think so because the whole thing about going to school is about so much more than learning stuff. But it's a question we should be asking ourselves, challenging ourselves all the time. This beautiful building we're in, incredibly well equipped, is this how they're going to, 50 years from now, is this the kind of building we're going to have? Question, we have to ask that question. This is a website that gets Latin Americans especially, and especially Brazilians, really mad. I mean mad like how do you say mad in that sense? What's the translation? How do you say that in Portuguese? How do you say that? Huh? Yeah, that's the word I was looking for, yes. Or you know, an ataque de coraje, that kind of thing. Why does this piss people off? Well, it pisses people off because in a country like Brazil, especially in the places that I work with, like the culturas and Herbert knows them well, the binationals, all these different places, they have. When I first started going to Brazil in 1923 or whatever it was, they had all these native speakers there. The cultura, which has, I don't know, 26,000 students or something, huge number, millions of native speakers everywhere. Go there now? There aren't any, they're gone. Whew. Why have they gone? Because they don't need them anymore. By brackets, let's discuss what native speaker means. That's for another time. But they don't need them anymore because they all speak such bloody good English themselves. That is, so in a country like Switzerland, you must have a native speaker. Why? This country is crawling with people who speak perfectly good English, whether they come from this canton, that canton, or Italy, or Paris, or wherever they are. And then this pops up. And it says, learn American English from native speakers, because that's going to be better. Bollocks. But that's not what I showed you here. We, as I said, for another time, discuss. But of course, the really scary thing is, and it hasn't caught on yet, is that this little outfit, there are teachers online 24/7. You don't need to go to a classroom. You can have access to a teacher from your bedroom. That's not a very good sentence. I'm going to rephrase it. You can have access to your teacher from wherever. And in case, just to say, I mean, this is happening. Many of you will know about the Plan CEL and the one laptop per child in Uruguay. And a lot of teaching, English teaching, goes into primary schools beamed from teachers in the Philippines or in Argentina or in Colombia or other places. If we want to stay with the game, up with the game, it's not enough just to observe this stuff. We can't just observe it, we have to say, so what do we think? What's going to happen next? What can we do next? How do you feel about this? What do you think? Is this a good idea? And if it isn't a good idea, why? The questions have to be asked all the time. Here's another question. And we haven't been asking this nearly enough, because any second now it's going to come up and throw the world away. You know, for years and years, all my teaching career, bloody grammar has ruled everything. And when you ask people what their syllabus is, they think you're asking them when you teach going to. Grammar syllabuses rule the roost. Any second now, that's going to be blown out of the water. I promise you, that is going to be blown out of the water. It's unsustainable. We know, and people keep telling us, and we keep understanding that if you drum grammar into students for 10 years, they do not end up speaking English. I'm not saying that grammar is not important, I'm not that stupid. But having grammar as the organising principle on which most lessons are based just doesn't do it, especially in public education systems. How else can you explain how in country after country the moan of English language teachers is that people spend 10 years in secondary school or whatever it is learning English, and at the end of it they come into a private class, and you know where they put them? Beginners. What's going on? So some disruption is on the way for that. Is it vocabulary? We've had people trying to design lexical syllabuses before with a mixture of success. But here's a disruption which is either going to fizzle out or it is going to explode. Change is very slow until it isn't. Change is very slow until it isn't. And of course, I'm talking about the elevation of content over language. The elevation of content over language. If you want an acronym, it's CLIL I'm talking about. Content and Language Integrated Learning. I'll go on quoting this for about the next 10 years, I suspect, but at a conference we were at in northern Spain, in Vitoria, I was on a panel. I mentioned this in my workshop this morning. And a man called Phil Ball, who is a CLIL messiah, he said this quote, he did say this, it's not my imagination, you've read this book. He said, if you want students to learn English, don't teach the language. If you want students to learn English, don't teach the language. In other words, if content is what you're teaching them, the language will come with it. And the whole CLIL movement says that whereas in the past we'd say, oh, I really want to teach the past tense, I really want to teach the past tense, that's the language. And then you find some content to teach the past tense with some story about a shipwreck or something. What CLIL says is we've got it all wrong. We need to just turn it around and say, if I get you interested enough in the content that you want to explain it, the language will come. And the whole point about CLIL, of course, is you can't have a grammar syllabus. Well, you can. But if your students are going to learn about the life cycle of a butterfly, they will have to use the present simple. But you're not going to teach them the present simple for 2 bloody weeks. You'll teach them just enough of the present simple they need to explain about the life cycle of the butterfly and all the technical words you need for butterflies. Now, CLIL is sort of making heavy inroads. It's been banging around in Scandinavia for quite a long time. The country where they're doing the most that they're desperately trying to do is somewhere like Spain. And in Spain, what we know is that it has some incredible successes and some pretty turgid failures. Though whether they are to do with the methodology or the money or something, that's a whole other issue. But I'm still amazed. I've got an audio of a class in Madrid from a woman called Magdalena Custodio Espinar and her colleague Marta Cervera, and they were working with 7-year-old kids, boys. They're all boys, I think. I don't know, but and they were teaching them how sound is made. So they downloaded this Audacity, you know, that free audio software. And there's some beautiful pictures, I'll show you some other time if you haven't. Beautiful pictures of these kids speaking and then watching the sound waves in their voice and getting really excited. And there's this 7-year-old boy in his English class, primary kid, and he said, sound is made when an object vibrates. And he says it with pride and passion. And you think, God, that's language learning. I have a dog. His name is Spot. By the way, I don't want to knock I have a dog, his name is Spot. It's really important. Kids like talking about that kind of stuff. But this possible revolution is possible, note, revolution is the suggestion that maybe we need to have massive disruption in the things we do and we ask students to do. And let's go a bit further. What about the way we learn? Well, those of us who are IATEFL members, past presidents, I've been a member since about, I don't know, the First World War or something, I don't know. IATEFL's my home team, you know. And Sarah said to me something about, you know, she's giving a plenary at this year's IATEFL conference, which is pretty damn cool. What do you say? You said IATEFL's my home team. And I have exactly that feeling about it. It's my home team. Well, the biggest thing that's almost ever happened in IATEFL, although past presidents would disagree, but they do things behind the scenes, so I don't know. That's because Herbert Buchter was the president of IATEFL some years ago. The biggest thing that happened was the closing plenary in 2014. And it was given by this man, Sugata Mitra. And Sugata Mitra, I'm not going to go into detail, a little bit of detail because it matters for this talk. His idea is, he was the guy who did the hole-in-the-wall experiment. Does that mean anything to you? Basically, in a slum in New Delhi, they put a computer in the wall at child height, so no adult was going to go near it. And to make a very long story very, very short, kids who didn't speak a word of the computer language gathered around the screen, and they gathered around and they started messing around with the screen. Pretty soon, and no teacher told them which buttons to press, there weren't any teachers. Pretty soon, well, there weren't any teachers, and pretty soon, the kids were using the computer without any trouble. So good that they started downloading antivirus software, the whole damn thing, you know, this is really cool. And this led him to suggest that, you know, what are teachers for? We don't really need teachers. All you need is to ask the right questions. If you ask students big questions and have them, by the way, this is crucial what he's talking about, a group of 4 or 5 students and 1 device. Not 1 device per student, because the interaction between the students as they access the device, that really matters. So it's no good just having your device, because there's no interaction. But if I get the 5 of you sitting around a computer trying to do something, then he says that's how people learn. And his argument is that if you ask students important questions like, do we have souls? Ask an 8-year-old, do we have souls? And you put them in groups of 5 and they give them Google, they will be able to come back with a perfectly coherent answer later on. Or, you know, why do men have moustaches and women don't? You know, put them around the computer and then Because all you have to do is ask the big questions. Because what there's so much to say about this, by the way, and about the way he says it, which is content for another long discussion. But what he might have said, he didn't actually say this, I'll explain who said this in a minute. What he might have said is nothing motivates students more than when they discover the meaning behind a subject of their own accord. And he says, you don't need teachers, you just need grannies. Which is the stupidest thing he ever said. But, well, sorry. But his idea is you don't need a trained teacher, you just need a sympathetic adult. To say to you, so what have you discovered? How did you discover it? That's all you need, apparently. It's a bit like I suppose, automated burger machines. You don't need cooks, you just need someone to make sure the thing is tightened up properly. And Sugata Mitra has caused an immense amount of controversy, partly, I suspect, because he came to a conference of language teachers and cheerfully, with a big grin on his face, said, well, we don't need teachers anymore. And that tends to be a bit provocative, I'd say. But let's go to Berlin. Oh no, well, of course, I meant to say, am I in the zone? Okay, perfect. Yes. I meant to say that Sugata Mitra advances this as a brand new vision, but of course it's not new at all. Does anyone recognise this? I know one or two people will. Yeah, this was published, a book published in 1970, 69 and 1970, and the title sort of says it all. It's Ivan Illich, who was an Austrian Catholic priest, as it happens, and he led this seminar in a place called Cuernavaca in Mexico in 1969, and this book grew out of that. De-schooling society, because like many radical thinkers before, since, and in the future, you know, he had very powerful arguments to make against schools as organizations. There are powerful arguments the other way, by the way, and I don't want to get into that. But this is the quote that comes out of that book, that I think. Which least needs manipulation by others. That means you. Sorry, it means me too, I'm not trying to say. But this argument has always been around. That learning can take, you don't have to be taught things. And the whole discussion we've been having ever since I got into teaching, between the sort of that awful kind of climb between teaching and learning and where the two operate together, that's what this is all about. And Sugata Mitra, to his credit, is tapping into that and provoking us to talk about it again and again and again. Let me tell you about Anton Oberländer. He's from Berlin. And he and his mates wanted to go to the UK in the days when if you're a European it was easy, and they wanted to go to the UK and sort of visit. So he went to the national train company in Germany and said, could you give us free tickets please? And they did. All of them, they got free tickets. And the train company was so amazed about the way he'd done this and his skill at doing this, and the sheer chutzpah of him getting all these free tickets, is that they asked him to come and give a motivational talk to the train company's employees. Anton Oberländer is 14 years old. And he's from a school, forget that, he's from a school in Berlin where they don't teach. They say, this is from The Guardian, by the way, and it's just no grades, no timetable, Berlin. If you Google that, you'll get the article. And what they say is, we just set a bit like Sugata Mitra. They just set the kids tasks and challenges and let them get on with it. And they say that the effect is profound. It's so much more impressive. I can instantly hear in your heads all the caveats and the yes, but it's going to be different. And this is probably sort of, you know, a special district of Berlin where they're all terribly, you know, good families. I don't know what you're thinking. But he said one or two very interesting things in this article. He said, and this is what Sugata Mitra might have said, but this is what the head teacher there says: nothing motivates students more than when they discover the meaning behind a subject of their own accord. And then he goes on to say two or three really interesting things. He says, I think that's the most perfect metaphor. The idea that you can suddenly, at an ETAS conference or the Ministry of Education or the entire sector, or you're a huge publishing company, that you can change the world, you might be able to do it through force, fear, or money. We see signs of some of that stuff going on at the moment. But if you really want to change things, and you should really want to change things, or at least be in the zone of wanting to know how things are going to change, it's little speedboats that do the trick. Trying things out, thinking of new things, getting together with 2 or 3 people, trying to do something really dramatic. They tried, by the way, they tried the Sugata Mitra stuff at International House in London. In my opinion, they thought it was a huge success. In my opinion, it had mixed results. But you know, you have to give them about 1 million gold stars for trying. So for 2 weeks, they got students in and they just asked them questions. There was no teaching, no correction, no nothing. They just asked them questions and got them to do things. By the way, nothing new in that. Dick Allwright, 1972, doing the same kind of thing at Essex University. But doing stuff, little speedboat stuff really matters. And then they say something, this head teacher says something which is just going to make you laugh. Look at this. Look at this. And by the way, I don't laugh at those teachers. I'm a creature of habit, so are you. And I'm a creature of habit, especially of how I started to become a teacher. And I've done a lot to try and, what were you talking about? Adjusting my mindset, Sarah. I try to adjust my mindset, and I'm doing it really well, sometimes. But the whole point is that if we don't adjust, then we're in trouble. If you want to deal with a world in which Donald Trump is the president of the bloody United States, you've got to adjust your mindset somehow. And I'm not American, so it doesn't really affect me, but I've got to deal with a world in almost the most fundamental thing I believed in, which is I am a European. I've got to adjust now. What am I going to do? Well, it's no good just being, anyway. And teacher training? Is it that different from how it was 15 years ago? And if it isn't, why isn't it? We should be pushing out. Oh, shut up, Joe. So here we are. You remember him? Don Thurber. Change is slow until it isn't. Change is slow until it is whoosh. So what can you do? Well, let's be quite clear. If there is a major disruption on the horizon that you haven't thought about, sometimes we can do nothing. And if you want an image, go for an image of tsunamis or Ubers or mattresses or something like that. But that's really, really gloomy. I think, on the contrary, if we ourselves are prepared to be innovators ourselves, then at least we're physically and mentally ready for what might be coming. The only thing you can be sure of is that if we stick here doing what we've always done, then we're passive receivers of what's coming. But if teachers, and after all, that is, you were saying, why are people here? You were saying in your opinion this morning, well, we're kind of a special breed here. We come to conferences, so we must be a little bit curious instead of just doing our job day after day after day. But the curiosity has to be a curiosity which is innovation. How do we innovate? How do we think of what the future might be like? How do we think of what might be coming? How do we plan to do things better and not just the way it's always been done? And I know, by the way, about school systems, and you have to do this, and you have course books imposed on. We know about all that sort of stuff. Small speedboats. Small speedboats, little changes, little innovations, little things, little sitting down. If this job is worth it, and nobody has enough time, I know about all that stuff, but if this job is worth it, even a 5 or 10 minute conversation with 2 or 3 trusted colleagues about what we could do better, differently, more excitingly, that's worth it. And what Don Thurman quoted from the business world is that in times of change, and boy, we are living in a time of change, the primary driver of success was an ability and willingness to challenge assumptions. I think we've got to the stage. I'm worried about this. I write methodology. I've been writing methodology for decades, you know? And I worry about this because if you look, I've got, my main book is now in its 5th edition, and there are lots of differences between edition 1 and edition 5. Of course there are, because the world's changed. But I wonder, is there still too much which is the same about it? Maybe I really need to challenge every assumption I've got. I think if we want to be ready to face disruption, we have to challenge every assumption we've got. The grammar syllabus, challenge it. This kind of, pair work is the best? Maybe it is. Challenge it. Challenge everything. If you challenge things, innovation stands a chance. And if innovation stands the chance, we're kind of fit and ready for what's coming. But if we're not innovative, then we're not fit at all, and we may be washed away. Then he said something else, and this really interests me. You know what? I had this conversation with Sarah, and I had this conversation, I had this conversation with you, and we've had it before with Dave Allen here, which is, I don't know anyone who voted for Brexit. I don't know anybody. It's not true, I know one person now. 2. But none of the people I know and socialise with and professionally work with, they didn't vote for Brexit. You know why? Because I talked to my tribe. And my tribe was 48% of the British population who voted. Cambridge, where I live, voted massively to remain. Because we're all good. No, so anyway. So how come we got bamboozled into this thing, which I think is a tragedy and a disaster for my country? Well, partly because we had an idiot Prime Minister who thought it was a done deal. But partly because the only people we ever talked to were our people. And you know what? They really thought, the Democrats, they thought they had it in the bag. They really thought they had it in the bag. Can you imagine what it must have been that night if you were one of Hillary's chief campaigners? Yeah, we know she won the election. By 3 million votes she won the election. But they had no idea. And maybe one of the reasons is they were just talking to their tribe. And what do? And this is not a criticism of ETAS, please don't misunderstand me. ETAS, I know, tries to be as inclusive as it possibly can. But this is us. We're all part of our tribe. But what he says is if innovation means bringing people in from all over the organisation, getting so many different people, if we are going to be prepared to go forward and certainly meet disruption, or even maybe disrupt things ourselves, then it's not enough just to talk to each other. We need to talk to lots of people, different people, disparate people, not just our tribe. And we were talking about this at the Norwich Institute of Language Education in August, and someone said afterwards, maybe in the next conference we should make a point of making sure that all the presenters don't come from our tribe. See what happens then. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? It's a thought. So there you are. I suppose if I could conclude this talk with 1 or 2 sentences, it would be number 1. Change is very slow until there's disruption. There are sharks everywhere. The only way we'll ever be fit and ready for any of that stuff is if we ourselves are fit and ready. And one of the ways of doing that is to innovate. And you only innovate if you question every assumption you've ever had. If you question your assumptions, you may very well end up saying they are right. But if you don't question them, how do you know? Years and years ago, a wonderful guy called John Fanslow, well, a unique guy, I think is the best way I can describe it, called John Fanslow, wrote a book called, oh God, I've lost it, what's it called? The big one, fat one. Anyway, the point, nice matey too, that's why I can't remember it. My memory's going. But his basic thing is, if you always do something this way in the class, do it the other way. Completely opposite, and you will discover things. Challenge your assumptions. And then things will be better. And the future will be
Can you speak for the